Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now guys, we all know that the singular most pressing matter that the Nigerian state is contending with, the biggest problem that we have in our country, is corruption. That is the one thing above all else that is the singular biggest problem that afflicts and holds back that country. That is beyond question. We all know this, and everybody internationally knows this as well. Now, the biggest name in that corruption space, the grandfather and the person that has institutionalized the sort of level of corruption that we're seeing in Nigeria now, is no other name than Babangida. So when you think of corruption, you think of Nigeria, and then when you think of corruption in Nigeria, the first name that should and often does come to your mind is Babangida. So Babangida is the marquee name, is the poster boy, is the icon, is the golden boy of the Nigerian corruption scene, is the most corrupt person in the Nigerian space. That's not to say that he looted the most money, but he brought that level of looting to the Nigerian space, that looting with impunity, just going to the central bank and just emptying it. He brought that into the Nigerian space, because prior to Babangida, what we had was just small time thieves, people like Alhaji Abubakar Alhaji, who is still $500,000, Umaru Diko, who is still $700,000, and then they were chasing them internationally. But people like Babangida, they brought in this new thing that you just empty the whole treasury, and then you use that resources to battle it out. And that has been the template ever since, because everybody that has succeeded Babangida has tried to outsteal Babangida. Obviously, Abacha is a name that you all know and recognize, and you know how much money the country has recovered from him. And Abdul something, the one that replaced Abacha, that handed over to Obasanjo, he just went in and just with bullion vans and just emptied the CBN. So that's what he did. And then the corruption under Obasanjo also is legendary, and that's been the succeeding stories ever since. So the number one, the ground zero, the number one boy, the ground zero, the marquee name, the golden boy of the Nigerian corruption scene is of course Babangida. So this name is now flashing up again. So guys, I bring you this. Nigeria probe $12 billion missing oil windfall under Babangida. This is what Falana is urging the EFCC and the ICPC. So Nigeria probe $12 billion missing oil windfall under Babangida. This is attributed to Femi Falana, and this is something that is requesting of the EFCC and the ICPC. So now let's get into the body of it. Human rights activist and senior advocate of Nigeria, SAN, Mr. Femi Falana, has again resurrected the issue of the alleged missing $12 billion oil windfall under the administration of General Ibrahim Babangida retired military government, calling on the EFCC and the Independent Corruption Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, to launch an investigation on the disappearance of the funds. Falana also sought the investigation of the $16 billion purportedly spent on generating electricity in the country as promised by President Muhammadu Buhari. He stated this in a keynote address delivered yesterday at the conference on Agenda Setting for Citizens, Interaction with Stolen Assets Recovery, Abacha Loot Recovery, and Utilization as Case Study, organized by the Human and Environmental Development Agency in Abuja. The human rights lawyer wondered why the anti-graft agencies have not investigated the disappearance of the sum of $12.2 billion from under the Babangida military junta. He reminded Nigerians that a few years ago, the SERAP, SERAP, and other 5 NGOs sought to compel the federal government to recover the huge amount but the Federal High Court struck out the case for want of locus standi on the part of the plaintiffs. Falana noted that since the anti-graft agencies have the statutory power to recover stolen public money, it is high time that the missing 12.2 billion was traced. He said, since the probe has been delayed on the grounds that the federal government could not locate a copy of the report of Pius Okigbo's panel on reorganization of the central bank, happily, a human rights body which has found a copy of the report will not hesitate to collaborate with the anti-graft agencies if they are willing to investigate the missing funds. During electioneering last year, President Buhari threatened to probe the $16 billion allegedly, purportedly spent on generating electricity in the country. This allegation ought to be investigated without any further delay. Following the death of the military head of state, General Sani Abacha, in June 8, 1998, its successor, General Abdul Salami Abubakar, yes, so that was the name I was searching for, Abdul Salami Abubakar, ordered a probe into the looting of the Central Bank of Nigeria from 1993 to 1998. At the end of the inquiry, it was established that the late dictator stole over $5 billion from the vaults of the Central Bank of Nigeria through his national security advisor, Mohammed Gwazo. A substantial part of the stolen funds have since been traced to over 140 bank accounts in Western countries and some remote islands in the world. According to the activist, based on report of investigation, the federal government recovered $635 billion, 75 million pounds, DM 33 million, and 9 billion naira, as well as several vehicles and properties in Abuja, Lagos, and Kano. In addition to the 40% interest in West African refineries in Sierra Leone, other assets were recovered from the family and associates of our late General Abacha. The forfeited assets were promulgated into law and signed by General Abubakar on May 26, 1999. I have since confirmed that all the funds and assets listed in the schedule to the forfeiture of assets, etc., certain persons, Decree number 53 of 1999, had been recovered and forfeited to the federal government. Upon the restoration of civil rule in May 1999, the Olusegun Obasanjo administration embarked on the recovery of the remaining Abacha loot. At page 495 of the second volume of his book entitled My Watch, former President Obasanjo stated, "By the time I left office in May 2009, over $2 billion and 100 million pounds had been recovered from the Abacha family abroad, and well as 10 billion naira in cash and properties locally." Under Goodluck Jonathan's administration, the recovery effort continued and more of the loot was recovered. According to the government, its effort led to the recovery of $226.3 million from Liechtenstein, in addition to 7.5 million euros that was recovered from an associated company of Abacha's in Liechtenstein. The federal government also recovered and repatriated the sum of 22.5 million pounds confiscated from an associate of Abacha family by the authorities of the island of Jersey. Based on public demand for a detailed detailed account of the loot recovered by the federal government, a former minister of finance claimed rather falsely that the sum of $500 million from the Abacha loot had been spent on some projects in the 6 geographical zones of the country. To lend credence to this fraudulent claim, the World Bank confirmed in a reply to an inquiry by CSERAP that the £500 billion pounds had been judiciously spent on some developmental projects. The HEDA attempted to confirm the projects but could not locate them. It was at that juncture that the board of the World Bank withdrew its endorsement of the Phantom projects. Sometime in 2015, the Premium Times, in an online news medium, reported that $322 million and £5.5 million from the Abacha loot was released to former National Security Advisor Colonel Sambo Dasuki whilst confirming the transfer of the funds. A former Minister of Finance stated that it was released under an emergency to purchase arms and ammunition to prosecute the war on terror. From the investigation conducted by the EFCC, it has been confirmed that the funds earmarked for arms procurement was distributed to well-known individuals. With respect, the excuse for the release of the sum of $322 million and £5.5 million for the alleged prosecution of the war on terror is untenable, having regards to the fact that the former president, Jonathan, had secured the approval of the National Assembly to take a loan of $1 billion to equip the armed forces to fight insurgency. Therefore, the self-induced urgency created by the government is not a justification for the utter violation of the Constitution and the Public Procurement Act. In spite of public pressure, the federal government ignored the demand to account for the loot. Thus, the Socio-Economic and Accountability Project (SERAP) filed an action at the Federal High Court for mandamus to compel the federal government to account for the loot. In a historic judgment delivered on the case, the presiding judge, Idris J., as he was then, granted the reliefs sought by SERAP and ordered successive governments to account for all the loot recovered since 1999. A former president whose administration recovered the bulk of the loot arrogantly said that the judge was stupid for having the temerity to have asked him to account amongst other rulers. It is public knowledge that the recovery of the Abacha loot has continued. Last year, the federal government recovered $321 million from Switzerland based on the agreement with the Swiss government. The sum of money of $321 million is currently being distributed to the poorest people in Nigeria as part of the cash transfer policy of the Buhari administration. Another sum of $268 million has just been confiscated by the British government. Curiously, the British, American, and Swiss governments are insisting that they are entitled to a share of the confiscated loot on account of the loot that has been recovered so far by the federal government. President Buhari ought to publicly apologize to the Nigerian people, having denied that late General Sani Abacha was involved in any criminal diversion of public funds. From the foregoing, it is pertinent to note that not less than $3.5 billion had been recovered from the Abacha loot. Much more can still be recovered, but apart from demanding for full account of the Abacha loot, we must insist that the investigation of the criminal diversion of looted wealth be extended to cover other indicted public officers. So now this is Femi Falana effectively calling out Babangida, because really anybody that is saying that is tackling corruption in Nigeria and does not tackle the name Babangida is really just fooling himself and having a joke. And we already know that this Buhari character, this Malam Buhari, is not really tackling any corruption, because he always maintained that Abacha was an honest man, that he never stole anything from the public, in spite of the fact that nearly $4 billion has been recovered internationally from this guy. Buhari is still maintaining today that they are lying against Abacha. So now where's all this money coming from? Is this donation from abroad? Are they giving us $4 billion just to tarnish Abacha's name? I don't think so. So now this tells you already all you need to know about this Malam Buhari character. But the real culprit in Nigeria, the number one criminal, the number one Barawo, the head, the one de la one, the Don one of criminality and corruption in Nigeria is Babangida. And until and unless that name is addressed, then there's no fight against corruption taking place in Nigeria. So conversations in the comment section is what I am inviting. What are you making of all this? So come tell me, Babangida looting, Abacha loot, Buhari and the lootings that is going on now, Babachir Lawal, Abdullahi Ganduje, and the endless looting of public funds in Nigeria. They're estimating that over $250 billion has been looted from Nigeria since independence, and the Western banks have account of all these people. So come have a discussion about all this with me in the comment section. But before you come have this discussion with me, click on the red subscribe button so it turns gray, bell button, that way you're notified every time I drop a new video. Then come let me know what you're making of all this in the comment section. So I'll leave you here, meet you in the comment section, but here I say peace.